Notice that from this it goes 1252 to 1254. 1253 was just a full page picture, and I just deleted it because it didn't have any text. So you're not missing any of the story here, right? So let's look at this first paragraph. It's really important to note that the first thing he tells us is that he was hated. He tells us where we are, Moulmein and Lower Burma, right? And he says he was hated not because of who he was as a person, but, it was his role, that it was the only time he's been important enough to have that many people hate him. So, and then he tells us who he is. So think about how he's doing this as an introduction. This is a short story, really. It is creative nonfiction, right? I will say that we don't really know if this is Orwell speaking as Orwell, the persona that he's created that actually did do all these things, or if he's created a story. I mean, he just says I. He doesn't identify I, George Orwell, right? We don't know who the I is here. And we don't know for sure that Orwell ever shot an elephant. We do know that at the time he was stationed in Moulmein, there was an incident where an elephant was shot. And then soon after that, Orwell was transferred to a different job in a different region. But it's not clear if he shot it. So we know that he must have seen something. He either did it himself or he witnessed it, and he's created this story. So how much this is him taking events that happened and crafting a story about it, and how much of this is actually kind of a confessional of this is what happened and what I did, we don't know. And I don't necessarily think that that's important in order to find meaning out of it, because we know that this happened. We know that what he talks about in the story is very reflective of what actually was going on and describing the culture and the time. So we know that's very realistic, right? So again, when we look here, he's almost writing this almost like an essay. So he's introducing us by telling us what are the important things for us to know. Where it is, Moulmein, Lower Burma, what he was doing. He was a subdivisional police officer in the town, and he was hated by everyone. And then in this introduction paragraph, he gives us examples of exactly why he feels he was hated, and of the aimless, petty kind of way that the Burmese expressed their bitter anti-European feeling. Right? So again, he says no one had the guts to raise a riot. They can't act aggressively in a direct way. They had to be kind of passive. And so he talks about them spitting on the European women. He talks about when they're playing football or soccer, how he was tripped up and the referees would ignore it, and the Burmese in the crowd would yell with hideous laughter, right? Again, remember we talked about words and images? Think about him choosing hideous laughter. I always wonder, well, I go to a lot of sport events. I know that sometimes referees make bad calls. It's not necessarily because they intend to make a bad call. And when something happens and, your team takes a pot shot and they don't get called for it, yeah, a lot of times you're going, yeah, right? So I don't know that he's not just really paranoid. I mean, that might be something to look at. We only have his perspective here, right? We don't have anybody else's objective view of what's going on here. So we have to consider that when we're looking at this, that he's kind of unreliable.